you're married, especially asking the gentleman. What I meant is happily married. Oh, the hands go down like real quick. All right, so our next session is marriage, a word or a sentence. We have Nandini Krishnan, Fahad Samar, Dr. Sonora Jha on the casual cruelty of domestic bliss, and we have Madhu Jain as the moderator. Thank you all for joining us. Now, a small introduction about everybody who's going to be on the panel. First of all, starting with Nandini Krishnan. She's a writer, playwright, and a stage actor based in Madras, now Chennai, the city she grew up in. After working as a broadcast journalist in London and Delhi, she decided to freelance for print and web media and focus on her writings. Her first book, Hitched, The Modern Woman and Arranged Marriage, looks at the social context of arranged marriage in the urban and westernized India that most of us belong to. She's currently working on 2 novels in several plays. So, she's already on the stage. Next, we have Mr. Fahad Samar, who established his first company, Bombay Talkies, in the year 1993 and has since written, directed, and produced scores of television commercials, corporate films, and award-winning films and TV shows. He is well-known social commentator and humorist and has contributed regularly to the columns for Mumbai Mirror, DNA, and the Indian Express over the past 10 years. He also writes on food, wine, and travel for the Upper Crust magazine. His articles have published and appeared in a lot of huge magazines like Elle, Harper's Bazaar, and more. So, sir, if you could have you on stage, please. All right, do not forget to clap loud because tomorrow is Sunday, so you get a hop. You might just come in late. Next, we have Dr. Sonora Jha, the author of Foreign, published by Random House, India in the year 2013. She was born in India, where she had a successful career as a journalist in Mumbai and then Bangalore. Her last assignment was as Chief of Metro Bureau and Special Correspondent for the Times of India before moving to Singapore and then the United States, where she earned a PhD in political communication. She is now a professor of journalism in the Seattle University. Her novel Foreign is literary fiction based on the true stories of farmers' suicide in Vidarbha. It brings together her work as a journalist and an academic and a creative writer. Ma'am, thank you very much. And last but not the least, I have a lady with a very beautiful smile that I met yesterday, Madhu Jain, who is the editor of IQ, the Indian Quarterly. She has worked with India Today, Sunday, The Telegraph, and was the New Delhi correspondent for a French national daily. Her publications include her book, The Kapoors, The First Family of Indian Cinema, and chapters in several books. And now a round of applause for yourself. Oh, this had to be loud, yeah. So nevertheless, I'll hand it over to the amazing panel that we have here and enjoy yourself. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. After that, I dare not smile. Okay. Now, just before this, on this very stage, there was something in advertising, and the guru of advertising, Alec Padamsee, was talking about this image, the little lad, which was quite, can you hear me? Shall I, is that okay? Okay, thanks. Yeah, just before this panel, there was Alec Padamsee on the stage talking about advertising, and he was talking about that iconic little, the woman in the shower. So he said he did a lot of research, and he wanted to find out from women, what they thought of when they went in. Selling soap is about going into bathroom. So one of the women said, and you close the door, you're in the bathroom, and she said, because that's the time, if you're a housewife or working very hard, it's time for yourself. And she said, I was just dreaming, and at that time, Mr. Amitabh Bachchan was a young, also angry, but young man, and she dreamed of him coming on a white horse and carrying her off. So this was an escape thing. Now, marriage for many people could be escape. It could be, many things. Here we have a really lovely panel who, you don't even need a moderator with them. So each of them have dealt with marriage in their work, in their columns. And I thought, you've done a book which is Hitched, an Arranged Marriage. Her book is non-fiction research. Her book is fiction. And he's written Scandal Point, which is
which is a work of friction.
Friction, right? But his columns, he looks at these things, but they've all looked at society in her book, Foreign. So, Nandini, in your book, how do you look at marriage? What happened after you were doing research on this subject in your book? What did you come through with after this? Yeah.
First of all, when you look at the topic we've been given, marriage, a word or a sentence, I mean, it's just such a negative view of marriage as something that entraps you, something you're imprisoned in. And I mean, when I was doing my book was on arranged marriage, and among the urban westernized elite. So that is anathema to most of us. And people sort of look at you if you've had an arranged marriage as a freak, like or somebody who wasn't rebellious enough, who succumbed to what her parents expected of her. And I found while doing the book that many people really did want to get married. And let's say you're a journalist and you don't want to marry someone from the media. Now, if you're a journalist, you probably will meet some dashing person from an actor or whatever, whoever. But if you're, let's say, a lawyer and you don't want to marry a lawyer, or you're a doctor and you don't want to marry a doctor, now where do you go? You don't have time for a social life. And arranged marriage it's not just about, looking at a passport-sized photograph and then meeting that person at the actual mandap. It's become something like blind dates now, a series of blind dates. So I think we need to sort of start looking at the way we define marriage, the way we define attitudes to marriage. I think, yeah, that's what I came away with.
After your research, you came away with a different, what was the different perspective you came with?
The different perspective was that these women don't need to be rescued. I never thought of them as having to be rescued, but if you choose to have an arranged marriage, or if you choose to change your surname, or if you choose to observe Karwa Chauth, now that was a huge debate. I don't think any of these things is patriarchal. I don't identify as a feminist, so my view may be slightly different from those of many women. But then I think even feminism was about the right to choose, right? So as long as no one is forcing you to do something, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I met a lot of women at my book launches who'd come up and say, oh, thanks for not being judgmental of us because we had such a tough time explaining to our friends why we decided to have an arranged marriage. And I think that's a problem, that people say, why do you need to get married? Why do you need to have an arranged marriage? If you're dating someone and you don't want to have children, why do you want to get married? Why, so these are whys which we need to do away with.
These are all things we can come back to later. So now, what about you? In your work, it's fiction. How do you look at marriage and in your book as well as in your life? Or what are your views? Because it's such a big definition. We've all been spoiled. There was another session, Mills and Boon. With this Mills and Boon thing, we've all been ruined by, page 64, happiness, the end, but it's very different. So in your work and your views, how would you look at marriage? I had looked at it, yeah.
Thanks for that question, because my book is really about farmers' suicides, right? But it's not nonfiction, and you need strong characters. And for some of my characters, automatically, marriage was one of the themes, So there are two ways in which marriage shows up in my book, Foreign. One is Katya, who's the protagonist that is, lives in the United States. She was an unwed mother, so in the 80s or 90s, and so she left India because she felt like she couldn't raise her child within the milieu that existed in India at the time as an unwed, a child of an unwed mother. So she has this sense of bitterness or this sense of struggle against relationships and marriage. The beautiful marriage relationship that I've written about is the one between the farmers, Baji Rao and his wife, Gayatri Bai. And that one, it came so beautifully to me because I've almost written it, and one critic actually said that it sounds like a Bollywood kind of romance. But I left it at that, I didn't want to make it different because I do believe that these kind of marriages exist where there's a certain ease with the role play, right? And they live in a small village in Vidarbha. There's no questioning of that relationship. They're married when they're young, and there's a sense of we're now we're true partners. And I thought that just writing that was really beautiful because, a lot of writers will tell you, that they don't know what they're going to write until they start writing it. And I couldn't believe that that relationship was taking place the way it was, because I don't see many of those marriages in my life, but I see them in my imagination, and I've seen them sort of peripherally. So, so there were these two different characterizations of marriage in my book.
Fahad, what about you? Because in your book and all your columns, it's about life, marriage. You cover quite a large thing. Can we also look a bit, if you would look at, modernity or changing in marriage, because you're really looking at a section of society where change, maybe it's also a conservative society, but where change is happening.
Yeah, I actually, apart from Scandal Point, which is my novel, which is about the shenanigans of and the games that all sorts of games that people get up to, but also my column in the Indian Express, which is Summer of Discontent, talks about various such things. But for instance, I was saying about marriage, certain notions about marriage that I've talked about through these years, including the fact that people who elect not to have children, I for one certainly am one of them. We've happily married for the last 15 years, and my wife and I elect not to have children, and people either presume I'm gay, or the wife has a problem. They suggest very kindly adopting, or send us to the nearest fertility clinic. And it's a very difficult concept to grapple for them, that you can be deliriously happily married and not want children. And things like this, which sort of question your very notions of what is marriage. And I think that is something that would be fascinating for all of us to discuss.
Sonora, there's that cliche, love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. I don't know about the wheels coming loose, but what would you say? Love and marriage compatible?
Yes and no. I think sometimes I've seen greater love outside a marriage, and at one time I might have been uncomfortable to talk about my own personal experiences, but I'm in my 40s now and I just don't care, right? So I'm happy to talk about it. So I've been married twice and divorced twice, and now I'm dating my second ex-husband, right? And I can truly say that the love that we have now, without the expectations and the role play of marriage, is really, truly beautiful. And I am madly in love with my ex-husband, my second ex-husband. So, and it's the strangest thing. And we do have a lot of cultural differences. He's an American. My first marriage was to an Indian man. And this is an American man from New York. And we're very, very different. But I think that those differences within the marriage became hard. Whereas outside the marriage, there's a lot of romance, there's love, and there's appreciation for each other and each other's dreams, and a lot of support for each other that I think becomes very difficult when your partner's sort of caught in an everyday sort of routine marriage thing. So this was not what I had visualized for myself, right? I got married at the age of 23 for the first time, and I thought, mera pati, mera devta hai kind of thing. That's what I was raised on, Bollywood movies. The movie ends when people get married, right? Happy ending. So I hadn't thought, and I wasn't, overly, it wasn't about my career or anything. I was actually married to two really good men, and these were good men. I didn't leave because of violence or adultery or anything, but I left both marriages for some sense of it not being the best unit of happiness for me and for my spouse. And now I would like to introduce into the world the notion of being happily divorced, because I feel there is such a thing.
Twice,
and
as you
yes,
said.
happily divorced twice, 5 times, whatever. I think what tends to happen is that we tend to inflict on other people our notions of, oh, he must be a terrible man, that's why you left him, or, you must be so sad, bichari, and all of that stuff, and I think that we really need to move away from that for true love to actually happen, that true love is possible within these newer forms of relationship.
Just if you could quickly tell us what does not being married do? I mean, to the same man, I'm saying after, before is different, but what, do you move to a different place? What does it give you that marriage didn't?
I think it gives me my physical space, first of all. And I wasn't raised that way. I didn't feel that way, that I would want that eventually. But I found, especially because of differences, that there's a sense of, I'm actually excited to see him. And I live in my own home now, and he lives separately. He would, of course, like to get married again, too. But I keep telling him that why ruin a good thing, right? Because I think, one, I have my physical space. I have my dreams, my time, and I'm nurturing them. And we end up spending a lot of good time together. And, he had a child from his first marriage. I have my son. And we had tried that for 1 year. We blended our families together. And I was just telling our kids as well that, look at this. Like, we're not married, but look at how much love there is in this room. So I think what happens is, like, there's a certain sense of expectation that starts to wear down some marriages. And you sort of lose each other somehow in that. And it's not just all about romance, but you sort of start to feel a little bit claustrophobic or a sense of dejection. Having said that, I do believe that marriage is a beautiful institution. It works for people, and it's wonderful to see a good marriage.
Fahad, what about you? Do you think marriage is like kind of over the notion for today's generation, or there is something beautiful about marriage, or do we have to change what marriage means? Some of what we were discussing, this marriage itself is changing.
Oh yeah, entirely. I mean, there's so many kinds of marriages, and of course there is, open marriages. There are non-sexual marriages where we were discussing, where people don't seem to have any kind of physical contact. So all kinds of variations on the theme. So marriage itself is such an extraordinarily broad term, and within which, as long as two people find